How do you take a really bad thought experiment and turn it into one of the best stories of the year? We're about to find out. Hi, I'm writer and artist Dan Finlay, and this is The Story Grind, a show where we take a look at storytelling so we can become better storytellers. On today's episode, we're taking a look at issue number 1 of 8 Billion Genies from Image Comics. The Story Grind is brought to you by the stories that I make. Get one of my digital mini comics for free when you join the newsletter and get monthly updates on my writing journey. If you want to see more of my work, check out my novels on Amazon and my comics on Gumroad. Links are below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot, especially to a small channel like this. So what is 8 Billion Genies about? Well, here's the logline. If you had one wish, what would you wish for? What if everyone else on the planet had one wish too? That's 8 Billion Genies. 8 seconds after magical genies grant every person on Earth one wish, the world is transformed forever. And that's just the beginning. That's the logline right there. That's it. In my opinion, that's a terrible logline, especially for what this story ends up becoming. The concept is there, but there's really no heart. And I think that's something we can fix, right? At the end of this video, let's take a little bit closer look at the logline and see if we can improve it. 8 Billion Genies is a strange one. I think when I heard that first logline, I didn't like it. And I think the reason I didn't like it is because the pitch is so broad. It's so broad, it doesn't really sound like a story to me. It's like saying, what if aliens came to Earth? Or what if zombies roamed the Earth? And then your next question is, I hope you have more story than that. Fortunately, 8 Billion Genies does have more story than just a broad concept. I mean, we've all seen plenty of zombie stories, and they're all different because of the characters in those stories. Initially, I skipped 8 Billion Genies, but I'm glad I had a chance to read it because there is a lot more to it. I feel like it's very similar to a zombie movie or TV show where, sure, cataclysmic events happen, but the core of the story is really about a small group of people and how they react to extreme circumstances or an event. And that's what I really love about drama, is showing the way people act in stressful situations. So here are the credits. The series is 8 issues long, and this first issue is 25 pages. And I'll kind of point out that 25 pages for an issue in comics is really strange. Usually, these things print in 4-page signatures, so your comic is usually a multiple of 4 pages. The fact that it's 25 pages makes me think something happened in the writing stage where they had to just add one more page. Fortunately, I think Image Comics tends to have a lot of ads in the back, so it sounds like maybe they just subtracted an ad. But I am kind of curious. I'd love to hear from the creative team why they decided to go 25 pages instead of 24. All right, let's get into it. Scene 1, 5 pages long. So this first book pretty much takes place in the same bar. It's just all one location. So I'm going to break this up, at least this first scene up, into like groups of people. It's all kind of like 3 different families, essentially, and we focus in on them one at a time. So we start out by introducing the bar. It's called the Lampwick, and it's run by Will Williams, the bartender. And he is essentially the linchpin for all of these stories we're about to see. So we look at the first family, which is Will talking to Robbie, a 12-year-old boy. It's his birthday, and he's supposed to do something with his father, but his father is like literally passed out on the bar. So this exchange happens for about 2 pages. All right, so the next family that we're introduced to is not really a family by blood, but just kind of a family by circumstance. They're a band called the Bada Bings. This scene runs for about 1 page. They're a 3-member band, and we've got Alex on drums, Daisy on bass, and Brian on guitar. They're worried that nobody's going to show up for the performance, and the bar looks pretty empty. They ask Will, the bartender, to help them with some extension cords, and Will ducks out, leaving the 12-year-old Robbie to man the bar. Our third family in this story enters the bar, and it's the Zhangs, consisting of the husband, Wang, and his pregnant wife, Li Feng. They don't speak English, and they use a translator to tell Robbie that they're lost, and they're looking for the Lamplight Tavern. Will returns from the basement, and we discover that he can actually speak Chinese and tells the Zhangs that The bar they're looking for is actually across town. This is the lamp wick. They're looking for the lamp light. It seems pretty important to Wang that he be at the bar on time, and we'll find out why in future issues. Side note that this is a great, fast introduction to all the major players in this story. What do we know about these characters? Robbie's 12 years old today, and he's in a bar. His father is a drunk, and Robbie takes care of him. The Bada Bings are a struggling band without a following playing in a dive bar. The Zhangs only speak Mandarin and are lost, and the husband has missed a very important meeting across town, and he puts a lot of pressure on himself. So let's look at the conflict in this scene. So we got a lot of quick snippets in this scene, so it's a little harder to break down. I feel like this is more of an introduction to the cast and setting up their dilemmas. But if we look at the Zhangs, they kind of go from a positive or maybe even a neutral to a negative once they find out that they're in the wrong place. We look at Robbie, sort of like it's his birthday, but then we kind of see his father, who's sort of a drunk. That's a bit of positive to negative. The Bada Bings are kind of, I would say, sort of neutral. I mean, they kind of start out the scene wishing they had an audience, and that's kind of really all we get from them. But I would say since two of the three groups of people that we're looking at right now kind of go from a positive to negative, I'll rate this scene from a positive to a negative. Let's look at scene 2, which is 2 pages long. We go back to the Bada Bings. Alex asks Daisy to follow him outside so they can have a private conversation. They're in front of the van, and he confesses his attraction to her and asks her out, but she's not interested. At the same time, in France, a baby is being born. Now, on my first and even second read through, I did not understand what this baby being born was about. It's not a major character. None of these people in the hospital are important later on, but there is some significance to it. The weird thing is that the reader doesn't really find out what this significance is until much later in the book, and I believe it's actually the last issue in the book as to why this baby is being featured right now in the first issue. But by that time, you've actually completely forgot about this scene. So it's kind of a strange insertion. So what is the importance of this scene or this moment of this baby being born? Well, they don't tell you outright in the beginning, but it is the catalyst for what we're about to see next. So let's look at the conflict in this scene. The scene belongs to really Alex and Daisy. Alex gets rejected. So I'm going to say this scene changes from like a positive to a negative. Scene 3. 4 pages long. We get our first double-page spread of the book, and it's used incredibly well because this is an important moment. This is our inciting incident. Genies appear across the globe, one per person, and they each offer that person one wish, anything they wanted. So let's look at the conflict of this scene. This is a little bit of a strange one because this isn't really the end of this scene. It's sort of like interrupted by what we're going to see next, which is a title page, which is only 1 page long. At the very top of the page, it says the first 8 seconds, and then we see the planet Earth in the middle of the page, and at the very bottom it says human population and the genie population, both at 8 billion. So this is the significance of the baby being born. The baby was number 8 billion when it comes to the human population, and that triggered all the genies appearing. But of course, you don't really find this out until the very last issue, but it's not that big of a reveal. It's just sort of a reason. It's just the catalyst. So I don't feel so bad about giving that away right now. So we'll get several of these title pages showing us the progression of the story in units of 8. So this next scene is really a continuation of scene 3. And it's only like 1 page long. So I would say scene 3, title page, and then I'll say scene 3.2 is really just all one scene. It's just kind of interrupted by that one title page. But in this one page, we see that Will the bartender wishes that no other wishes made outside the bar can affect the bar or anyone or anything inside it. It's pretty smart thinking, right? So Will got his wish, so that's a positive. But to be fair, this isn't really a scene on its own. because there's no conflict change. So again, this is all really a part of scene 3. So I'll say this goes from a negative to a positive. All right, we get another title page, which is 1 page long. And the title page says this is the first 8 minutes. The human population is now 7.9 billion, and the genie population is now 7.998 billion. So a lot of genies and a lot of people have disappeared within the first 8 minutes. Scene 4, 11 pages long. We go back to Daisy and Alex outside the bar. Daisy wishes Brian, the other bandmate, would fall in love with her. And she says this right in front of Alex, the guy who just asked if she wanted to go on a date with him. Pretty brutal, right? Once Alex hears this, he storms back into the bar and orders a drink. Daisy runs in to see if Brian is in love with her. Alex spills that he just learned that any wishes made outside the bar have no effect on anyone inside the bar, and uses that information to rub it into Daisy's face. He's still a little bit better, right? Brian is pissed that Daisy would make a wish that took away his choice like that. And I think that's pretty fair. So we'll intercut this scene with Robbie waking up his father to tell him that something strange is going on. The father is finally shaken out of his drunken stupor. He hears an explosion and runs to the door and opens it up to see everyone's wish is playing out across the landscape. There's people riding dinosaurs, flying rocket ships, driving trucks filled with money, and mech robots shooting lasers, right? We get some quick cutaway shots of various people and what they wish for, including money, teleporting powers, flying, etc. The scene ends back at the bar where Robbie's father is being pulled back in. The final splash page shows the outside of the bar where more fantasies play out. We get a caption that says, "What would you wish for? Would you ask for anything for yourself? Or take something from another? Would you help or would you hurt? Would you change yourself or change the world? And forget about your wish. What about everyone else's? Come back next month to experience the first 8 hours." So let's look at the conflict in this scene. We start off with Daisy wanting to fall in love, but it doesn't go so well for her. Robbie's father wakes up to find a world in chaos. So I'll say positive to negative on both personal conflict level and an outside conflict level. So that's the end of issue 1. What follows is that every issue increments in time. The first 8 minutes, the second issue is 8 hours, third 8 days, etc., all the way up to issue 8, which takes place 8 centuries later. So really interesting time skipping through each individual issue. One of the really smart things that the creative team does here is some of the core characters actually don't use their genies right away. And I was hooked into really wondering what they would eventually use it for. And that carried me through the story for a while. Like, what could they possibly be waiting for? I read all 8 issues, and I'll say that around issue 6, the story really started to drag for me. There was a point where I actually didn't want to finish the story. I just wasn't that interested. But then I read issue 7 and 8, and they were amazing. And they really turned this from a mediocre book to an amazing book. Now, I really understand why everyone raves about 8 Billion Genies, but it really takes the last 2 issues to get there. One criticism I have is that I wish the characters would have gone a little further. Everyone kind of plays it safe, and I never really got to see anything dramatic or drastic when it came to their choices, the choices that they made. Nothing that made my jaw drop, and I think a setup like this is ripe for extreme choices. And I'm talking about choices of extreme selfishness that no one could imagine doing in real life. They've built up this really great playground, but unfortunately I don't think they push it to that limit. It would really be interesting to see maybe another set of characters and sort of what they went through. I wish the author had pushed it just a little bit further. All right, let's take a step back and look at a 10,000-foot view of the story map. We have technically 4 scenes, really. Scene 3, the title page, and scene 3.2 technically should be one scene. The title pages just kind of interrupt things a little bit, just to kind of set a little bit of a time marker, which will, become important because every issue kind of hinges on a certain amount of time that has progressed from the last issue. So really 4 scenes in the entire book, which is pretty nice. I mean, most of the issues that we've looked at in the past few videos have usually an average of 5 to 6 scenes. So it's really interesting to see that this one is only 4 scenes long. And it's 25 pages, so it's a little bit shorter than a lot of the other issues we've looked at as well. So, what do we know about the world in this very first issue? We know it's a contemporary world where everyone gets one wish. The story appears to be in the genre of contemporary drama, maybe slash fantasy. Definitely not a comedy, definitely not a horror. Um, Maybe it could lean into sci-fi, but I don't really see a lot of lean into technology here. And it takes place in present day, so I'll say I'll stick with the drama fantasy genre. What do we know about the characters in this first issue? Well, we know that Will can speak Chinese and that he keeps a pretty cool head in such a strange situation. For Robbie, we know that he has an absent father due to alcoholism. We see that Robbie is really the parent here taking care of his father. As the story progresses, the alcoholism kind of fades away pretty quickly, and I think Robbie's parenting slash responsibilities step forward, and his story focuses on him taking care of his own family. The Bada Bings are having some issues in the band, and they don't have a following. For the Zhangs, we know that they are late for a very important meeting, and the father is very responsible. So that's a lot of character information for a 25-page issue, which focuses on three families and a bartender. So I think it's really well done. This information is spread out pretty generously. It's very organic. Nothing feels too forced, and it creates a lot of empathy for all of these characters. So what's at stake in the story? So I think the stakes come down to protecting one's family. Even the Bada Bings are a makeshift family of sorts. Nobody in this bar really makes a selfish choice except for Daisy. Everyone else seems to weigh the idea of having a wish very carefully. They all seem to understand that if they make a bad wish, it could destroy them and the people they care about. I mean, that's really interesting to me. It's really about choice. And on top of that, when Daisy makes her wish that Brian would fall in love with her, Brian responds with, "Why would you take away my choice like that?" So I think there's like a theme of being able to have a freedom of choice that happens in this story. So, what are some of the great things that stand out in this issue that I'll use in my writing? I really enjoyed how the writer balances several stories at once. That tends to be extremely difficult for me. Scene one is 5 pages long, and every family member kind of gets a little bit of a highlight in that first scene. Scene two focuses on Alex and Daisy as Alex gets rejected. Scene three is our inciting incident, and we get a look at how everybody reacts to having a genie for the first time. We get some title pages, and then we get Will's very first wish. The very first wish of the series, of the book, happens within the first 8 seconds from Will, and that's the end of scene three. And then we have scene four, which focuses back in on Robbie and his experience with his trying to wake up his father, and his father experiencing all of the wish fulfillments that's happening at this point. And then we also get a look at Daisy and her interaction with her bandmate, who she's trying to get to fall in love with her. So really the only family that we aren't looking too closely at in this first issue are the Zhangs, and maybe Will a little bit as well, because he's kind of, like I said, he's a bit of the linchpin for this whole series, so, or I should say the linchpin for these families. But even with that said, we do get a really nice insight into each of these families that will follow throughout the rest of these 8 issues. So it's really great to kind of see how the creative team really bounces around to each family, gives them all a little bit of a spotlight, and gets us to care about each of them before we move on to issue 2. So again, this story really takes a very big, broad concept, but focuses it in on the people, on the conflict between these people, and how they experience this sort of extreme situation. And I really wish the logline had sort of pitched that right from the beginning, because I would have been completely on board. Unfortunately, it was so broad, it just didn't catch my interest. And I'm kind of worried about all the people who missed this reading the story as well, because the logline just kind of didn't nail it. So what are some of the things that didn't work in this story? So the baby being born feels a little out of place for me, especially since it doesn't really become clear as to why until we're like reading issue 8. And even by then, you've forgotten about the baby being born and it didn't really matter that much. I feel like there might have been a better way to integrate the birth of the 8 billionth baby in the world that triggered all these genies to appear. So looking at the whole 8 issues of this series, I understand why they stopped at issue 8, but I think it would have been stronger of a story if they had actually condensed it down to 6 issues. At 8 issues, that middle just sags so much, and like I said, especially when you're reading this one issue at a time, if I had picked up issue 6, I probably would have stopped right there. But like I said, issue 7 and 8 really, really rescue this story and make it worth a read. All right, so let's take a look at the log line and see how we can change it and make it more interesting. So first I'll read the first log line again so we remember what it was. If you had one wish, what would you wish for? What if everyone else on the planet had one wish too? That's 8 billion genies. 8 seconds after magical genies grant every person on Earth one wish, the world is transformed forever. And that's just the beginning. All right, now let's take a look at how we can improve this. First of all, what I would do is I would say this is a contemporary story, right? So if we're going to look at this, we're going to condense this log line, this whole story into a 2-sentence log line. I would say that we can just open up with the word when, which is our inciting incident. When everyone on the planet is given a genie that can grant one wish, it leaves 3 families sheltered inside a bar as the world erupts into chaos. So that's our inciting incident, and it also sets up our 3 families that we're going to follow throughout the rest of the story. All right, let's get into sentence number 2. Some of these family members use their wish right away, and some hold on to theirs. But how will they use their wish? For the better of mankind, for their families, or for their own selfish gain? That's it, log line in 2 sentences. It's interesting because I feel like the initial log line that they put out there touches on the inciting incident and the broad concept. And the very end of this book kind of touches on really the heart of the story. And I feel like they just didn't put 2 and 2 together. And if they had kind of taken the end of that book, that little caption at the end, and crammed that into the log line, it would have been a much stronger pitch. And I'll speak for myself. If I had read this pitch, I would have picked it up as opposed to just kind of hearing that genies are granting one wish to everybody and then just leaving it at that. But a great concept, really fun. The heart of it is really these 3 families and what they're going to do with these wishes, and sort of the suspense that carried me through this story as to what they're actually going to spend this one wish on. It's a really interesting idea. So what are your thoughts about 8 Billion Genies? Please leave them in the comments below. I really want to hear them. I feel like this is just one of those stories that people are still talking about. I almost passed it up, and luckily it was recommended to me, and I'm glad I got a chance to read it. So that's it for this episode of The Story Grind. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm writer and artist Dan Finlay. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share with your storytelling friends. Let's build a community where we can get better together as storytellers. That's it for me. I will see you next week. Thanks again. Take care.